Well, this is going to be interesting. I'm going to try my hand at recording a stock market outlook video focusing on, my focus list for next week. Last week in the market, we had a pile of large cap mega growth stocks, especially semiconductors, get really stretched out. And it certainly dropped my focus list notably for this coming week, as there's going to be a lot of stocks that need some time to set up. However, on my scan, I was able to find a few that look like they may be actionable this week. And I'm also buoyed by the chart of the QQEW, the equal weight QQQ, which you can see right now. On the weekly chart, you can see that we butted up against this pivot that goes back to the summer of 2022 and, of course, 2023. We've seen this pivot go long ago, actually, on some of the cap weighted indices, especially in tech. However, looking at this, although it may need a week of sideways, I don't think we're far away from being actionable against a wide swath of this market. Clearly, if this breaks out, we've got a breadth expansion going on, at least within tech. Non-tech, after my scans this weekend, still looks like a vast wasteland of ambiguity, but I do believe that there are going to be opportunities in the market for the coming week. If we drop this down to a daily, you can see that we've actually taken out a low pivot here. And while we may be a wee bit extended, I don't think we're terribly extended here. So by all means, a day or two of sideways, and I think this thing might be good to go. So I'm going to go through my list. These are ranked by where they came in within the weekly range, top to bottom. So we'll start with KLAC. Now, KLAC or KLAC Corporation, I've never known what this thing's actually called, does look extended here, much like most of the semis, and it certainly is. It is something I will probably not be actioning this week, but it is on my list to see how it acts. So I do have it on my focus list, as you can see on the weekly chart. Since taking out this channel, it created a pivot here. It consolidated pretty much for, it looks like, about 5 months. And along with many of the semis this week, it took off and it took out a low pivot. It is now taking out the standard pivot, but we are extended. Dropping down to the daily, you can see that even clearer. There's no way I would be interested in buying this until I see some tightness, a pullback. But it is one for my focus list for this week. Next up, again, it's another semi, one that I don't feel is too extended, but Teradyne on the weekly chart, as you can see, it has just recently taken out this little channel flag thing. And on the daily, you can see that that really only happened this week. So we have launched into a new uptrend that has taken out this channel. I see this as possibly actionable for next week, maybe not early in the week, but what I need to see now is a new pivot created. It may already be in at the Friday high at, it looks like, about 104.40, 104.60, and it may start to pull back early next week, and then it can create something and then push through there and work its way up to the standard pivot here at 110. But certainly high on my list is actionable for possibly later in the week. It may decide it wants to go further and then create the pivot. Either way, you got to wait. You got to be patient. That's the name of the game with some of these semi names right now. Moving along and going back to the weekly chart, we're going to look at Costco. Costco has been in this symmetrical triangle now for going on a year plus. It had earnings this week where it decided it was going to probe below the lower line of the triangle. And if you drop down to a daily, you can see it did not care to be below there, and it took off. There was actually an entry to be had on Friday. As you can see right here on the 65-minute chart, it actually gapped down on Friday after their earnings announcement, and then went red to green. If you got in here, you're a better man than I, woman than I. You're better anything than I, because I did not catch it. For me now, I have to wait. and see this thing consolidate above the breakout point. We've got a pivot here we can use, but this one, again, probably not going to be actionable for me this week, but it's certainly going to be on my focus list for possibly late in the week. Moving on, we've got Netflix, and going back to the weekly charts, you can see that we are now up against the pivot from the February high. And it's been kind of, as you can see, it's just been playing around in this kind of consolidation area here, which goes back to 2022. It's going to play around there, I think, for a little bit longer. But on the daily chart, you can see it is trying to push through now. So I do think that this one might be actionable early in the week. And if you actually drop down to a 30-minute chart, I actually played this on Friday as a day trade. After the pullback here, it started to consolidate and it pushed through this little pivot here. I did grab some. I was out fairly quickly, but this looks like it might be good from a continuing long trade. I would argue that it has potential to be actionable next week. Next up is MBLY. MBLY is an IPO from late 2022, one of these rare IPOs that actually went up from the time of the offering. And as you can see, it ramped into the February 2023 high. It consolidated in a range, and then on an earnings announcement, the wheels just fell off here. But also ramped pretty quickly back to the breakdown pivot, consolidated, and then recaptured it. And then it back tested that breakdown reversal and continued up and took out this pivot here, which is when I actually got in. You can see on a 65-minute chart how that was acting around that pivot, this tightness. And then on Friday, as soon as it pushed up, I grabbed some and it sort of never looked back, although the close wasn't great. I'm not overly concerned about that. I do think that this entire thing here is an ABC corrective flat of some kind, and that we are heading to new highs. The little wick that we saw on Friday occurred at this blue downtrend line and in towards the old highs. So I'm holding that one. Moving on to Wire. Wire just looks great. I mean, I don't know what more you can ask for. You've got a long base that occurred off the 2021 highs. It took until basically what day? This looks like January to take it out. It then flagged back into the breakout pivot. It actually, if we drop down to a daily, you can see the shakeout that occurred at the bottom. And now it's pushed up through that channel and it's gone sideways for most of May. We're back to the anchored VWAP off of the gap up. From here, I'm telling you, this one, it doesn't look like it needs more than a day or even less of consolidation. And I would be very, very interested. This is probably close to the top of my focus list for next week. So again, that's Wire. Moving on, we have something a lot lower in its base, and that is DoorDash. DoorDash has been basing now off the October low, like many others have. This one does look like it's possibly ready to take out this pivot from February. If we drop down to a daily, it might need to do some more time at this pivot, but it's worth putting on your focus list for this week. So I don't know if I'll be buying anything this week, but if this does decide it wants to take out the high from this day, which is 69.34, it's certainly worth dabbling in a starter position. Up next is one of the mega caps, and that is Tesla. Tesla, its move off the lows ran straight into this breakdown pivot. But since that high, which is in February, you can see, and especially on the daily chart, it's created a channel that it's probed above as of Friday. So this one has issues. It has overhead supply. It has a declining 200-day moving average, but it is starting to look very constructive. And if you and if it does decide it wants to continue and take out this channel and then maybe spend a little time handling out, in theory, the measured move coming out of this channel should be the same distance we see here from here, which takes it into the 300s. Again, this is not my favorite. It is still got a lot of issues, but it is worth noting simply for the relevance to the indices. But also, if that does decide to take out this, and it might be worth a move at least back to this breakdown pivot is basically what I'm saying, which is still a move up into the 215 area. But it's going to need to do some sort of tightening and create a pivot for me because I can't play it in that spot. Usually when something breaks out of one of these channels, it might keep going for a little while and then it pulls back. This is early days. We are just breaking out. If it decides it wants to pull back here, that's fine. And then we've got a pivot there, but it might just keep going a little bit and then do it. It's not actionable for me yet. It needs more structure since the breakout. Up next is another one of the mega caps, and that's GOOGL. As you can see, we've been butting up against this area of supply going back to early 2022. It is extended. However, the action on the daily chart around this pivot is actually pretty constructive near term. Now, it's kind of a late cycle flag that it's creating here, i.e., it's already moved up. This is not a very long flag. I mean, I don't know how much more you could play for this, but it was on my list actually on Friday as a scalp trade if it could take out. This is a lot similar to my Netflix play, which did trigger. But you can see that it's been, since the pullback, it went up and now it's just been consolidating underneath the Thursday high. And this is arguably worth a scalp. And it is high on my list for that and that only. It is very extended on the weekly. It's not something I would be holding long term, especially if I'm playing options. Next up is Bill Holdings. Bill Holdings is one of the more unique looking stocks on my watch list. What you see here is a breakdown pivot, which was taken out back in March of 2023. Then it consolidated. And then if we drop down to a daily, you can see that on an earnings gap, it took back that pivot. And not only did it take back that pivot, but it has now spent most of May consolidating above that high volume close. I am very high on the stock, at least for a move to the declining 200-day moving average. Again, this is not in a power trend by any stretch at this point, but I do like this consolidation to break up. And if it does just want to go to the 200-day, it's still a move to 110, 111 at this point, although this is declining, so that will come down. But this one is definitely possibly actionable for me this week. Next up, we have Carvana, a stock that I can't believe I'm interested in, mainly because I believe the fundamentals are just ugly, but so do a lot of other people based on a 50% short position. So based on that only, it should be at least worth a look. And then when I do look, I see that the move off the low in 2022 formed what I can only describe as a perfect impulsive wave. For those that know Elliott wave, I don't use a lot of that, but when it looks that clean, I'm fully interested in it. Since then, it has based off the February high underneath this 1050 pivot. It took it out, and since then, it's just been consolidating. I think this thing has more to run. It has a 200-day declining 200-day moving average just above it, but I do think that this consolidation looks a lot more bullish than bearish. It hasn't done anything yet, but I am watching for a move above this pivot, which is about $13. If it can do that, basically take out this triangle, I am willing to buy the stock despite its proximity to the 200-day moving average. Certainly worth the watch list. Next up is one that I'm kind of anticipating might do something this week. It's Coupang. Coupang I've been interested in since it took out its channel off of the IPO highs. Since then, it just kind of wedged out, and then it has broken out since then. If I drop down to a daily, you can see that wedge break, carried up. It had earnings. It's just been consolidating above this wedge. My expectation is this thing begins to turn up. The premise is that this entire move here is corrective and that the trend is actually going to continue. So while it hasn't done anything yet, it's on my watch list. There's no pivot created yet. There's nothing actionable, but I am anticipating something this week will begin. If it doesn't, so be it, but it's worth putting on my watch list, especially in a situation where we've got so many other stocks fully extended. And then the last one I have on my list is Samsura IoT. Again, this is another one, a lot like Wire, where we have taken out a key pivot and have consolidated above. And as you can see, if I drop down to a daily, this basically looks like a pretty clean ABC flat. And then we've had a move back up. So we back tested the support that needed to hold. It's moved up. It's now pulled back again. It's actually below a lot of the moving averages. So this is not one that I would buy on Monday. This is one I would actually wait for this low pivot to be taken out. And it kind of has to do that very soon. It is in its own cycle. It does not act like the rest of the market. It hasn't for some time. So despite the fact that a lot of the market's extended, don't be surprised if this one goes. Anyways, that's it for the video for the week that begins, I guess, on the 30th. Whatever, we do have Memorial Day on the 29th, so Tuesday market open, and then at the end of the week I'd recap these, and then I would put a new list of new stocks for the next week. We'll see how this goes. Let me know what you feel in the comments below.